And then with that, I am going to hand over to Liz. So thanks, Liz, so much for your patience.
So thanks so much, Emma, and thanks everyone. That was very helpful. And I guess just to add on the kind of note taking and say kind of how we'll treat any contributions made today. We are hoping to kind of draw insights, as Zoe said, for kind of informing policy advice. We recognise that you may be kind of talking in front of you fellow industry participants and maybe competitors. So if there's anything you would like to share with us that you don't want to share in this setting, do feel free to follow up a message afterwards. If there is anything that feels sensitive but you think we should still be aware of, very happy to take follow up afterwards as well. And I think we would appreciate if there's anything you particularly don't want attributed to you, just do flag that. We're not going to go around kind of quoting your company names excessively, but just if there's things that we should be particularly careful of, then please do kind of make us aware of that, and we will of course respect it. Okay, with that I am going to quickly share my screen just to give a quick overview of the three kind of overarching questions that we would like to cover, and then we'll go back to the first question. So with me one moment. So first question is more about your observations of disruption within the UK hydrogen sector, or indeed international comparisons more broadly. So to understand what kind of business models are most prevalent here, which ones you think have the greatest kind of opportunity and potential, and within the kind of overarching framework that Zoe has already talked through, and we can go back to that if it's helpful to have a prompt on the screen. What do we think is emerging within UK hydrogen, and in particular references to yourselves or other businesses you're observing within the sector? Do you have kind of those specific examples of disruption? The second session, with approximate timings here, is kind of what conditions are required for enabling disruption, and what barriers might exist for UK hydrogen specifically. So what do we kind of need to overcome to make sure that disruption could be a success in this sector? And the third question, focusing on kind of the role for government and potential intervention, what, if anything, would you like to see government be doing more or less of in this space to kind of help overcome some of those barriers discussed in the second session? So that would be the overall structure. I'll go back to session one, but just wanted to give you that context so that we're not kind of jumping ahead to answer the later questions in the first session. Can I just check before we start, any questions overall on the overall kind of framing of disruptive business models? Any questions on the scope, or are people happy to kind of jump in and start addressing this?
Yep, so floor is open, guys. You can raise your hands, you can speak, you can write in the chat. So yeah, feel free to just throw your thoughts out there. Everyone's digesting.
I'll go first with an observation. It's like, it's hard because it's disruptive. It's hard. So anything that government can do to make that process easier is definitely welcome. I think to answer the bottom question on the slide there, would you say your business is using a disruptive model? Yes, I think so. I said in my introduction, we believe we have an extremely disruptive technology that we're then looking to apply in interesting and novel fashions. And we're sort of noticing a bit of a trend in the hydrogen sector to move towards hydrogen as a service, so less being about equipment suppliers and more as a look, we'll provide you with the hydrogen that you need. I think we've got two comments on that. One, to the hydrogen sector as a whole, the grey hydrogen, the traditional sector, that's not particularly new insofar as it's the sort of thing that Air Products has been doing for a long time, but we're now seeing some of the low carbon hydrogen producers start to look at that model, and I guess I'm thinking of ITM Power in particular. I think they have a subsidiary called Hydro something or other that's set up as hydrogen as a service. Yeah, so that's some initial comments, if you like.
Thanks, Duncan. Ben, I think you've come off mute first, and then we'll go to Stella. Oh, sorry, Paul. So I'm so sorry about my name. Sorry, I saw you come off mute, and then I'll move to Stella. Sorry about that. Getting my name wrong.
It's okay. Yeah, I agree with that. What was said there. My company have been working with a company called Proteum in South Wales. They are a green hydrogen producer. I think what can be disruptive is increasing the ease of access to hydrogen for businesses, making it attractive to them. And I've seen an increase in use of deliveries of hydrogen bundle packs, which allow that delivery of a hydrogen service to businesses, and the technology for using the hydrogen has increased as well. So now you can buy fuel cell systems in a pack. Essentially, fuel cell systems in a crate can be delivered to a business. With all the system pre-built, pre-checked, allowing them to easily use the hydrogen as well to provide a reliable off-grid source of electricity, which can be really useful for businesses to increase the security of their business. I know there's been more of an increase of interest in various types of businesses in having a reliable source of off-grid electricity. So yeah, I definitely think that could be something that should be looked into. Using these pre-built systems and sort of promoting their use and promoting the delivery of green hydrogen.
Right. I'm going to hand over to Stella because she had her hand raised.
I would say what Paul's just mentioned is familiar. JCB are looking at non-road mobile machinery that's powered by hydrogen, and they sell that with the hydrogen fuel as part of the package. So that's something that is coming through. One of the observations I wanted to make that's probably a little bit more negative is industry and government seem to fall back on what's already in place. So they look naturally to the energy frameworks and the way that is done business in gas and electricity already. And when we look at what needs to be in place for hydrogen, we ordinarily go, right, how do we just change what's already in place instead of looking at what we do need to develop brand new? It's just like, how do we alter that bit and that bit because it's familiar for people? And I think that's probably holding innovation back in our sector, if I'm being honest.
Oh, thanks for that, Stella. I see a little bit of chat between Shane and Paul. I don't know if we want to bring this into the discussion as well as in the chat, and then we could hand over to Hugh. So Shane, do you want to maybe just field more broadly your question, and then Paul, maybe you can respond through
well, it's the point there about clearly the technology is evolving and improving all the time and at pace. So there's just a point there really about the tech adoption, whether that's a barrier. Just interested a bit more on that.
Yeah, I suppose these fuel cell systems you can buy, they're extremely reliable. Fuel cells aren't anything new. They've been around for over 100 years. They were used in the Apollo space missions. Fuel cells are extremely reliable bits of tech, but they're still expensive, and there has to be that initial investment by a business to have their uptake. So it'd be great if there could be a potential incentive for businesses to use them, and also there needs to be more availability of hydrogen delivery. There's only a small number of companies that will deliver hydrogen bundle packs. Hopefully once the hydrogen allocation rounds are done, that will increase, and you'll see more businesses providing hydrogen as a delivery. But I think if there's more initial investment there, the more businesses would be happy to take it up. Yeah.
Thanks for that. We've got a couple of hands raised, so I'm going to hand over to Hugh and then back to Duncan. Hugh, please.
Yes, sorry, don't mind. Two sort of observations really. One following on from that, and conversely, a similar one going on. So, two issues we're seeing on this now. A big part of, and I know we've got Stella Engine here. A big part of the developers' business case at the moment is to produce hydrogen and to tube trailer it via a virtual pipeline. So via tube trailers and lorries, transfer it to the site of work. Now, for a lot of industrial processes, the amount of hydrogen needed to get out of those tube trailers is a lot of the time more than can really be realistically achieved from a lot of the processes. So, you know, you're limited to what you can get out of a tube trailer as the pressure drops. Now, one of the issues, speaking with some of the developers they're having, is that they're only having, you know, they can only develop green hydrogen, only getting subsidies for hydrogen when the wind's blowing and the sun is out, which really is affecting the business case for these companies to transfer to hydrogen. So there's a big question I have there is by pursuing green hydrogen only being detrimental to the adoption of hydrogen as a fuel source. I'm not saying green hydrogen shouldn't be used, but I'm just saying it's a question there of, you know, are we tying our hands behind our back here as a country by only giving the incentives for green hydrogen? And the second point really was going on about the fuel cells, and that's more of a case of, we know that we've got grid connection issues across the UK, and a lot of projects are getting pushed back because of grid connection issues. One of the intermediate steps for that is to basically have off-grid power generation, and perhaps that is the key sector really where you know, tube trading hydrogen to may be a boon.
Okay, that's I think some great points. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand over to Duncan to maybe expand his thoughts on this ongoing discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Hugh couldn't have teed that up better, I think, in some ways. Just looking at the list of techniques that you've got on there, I guess interested to see, Liz, that price isn't on there, and I think that's one area where we think our technology brings an advantage. The last one about accessibility and convenience, part of what we bring to the party there is the fact that we can produce hydrogen on site. You know, as long as the customer's got access to an electricity connection and a gas connection, we will put the kit there and generate hydrogen at the point of demand effectively. So that brings a lot of benefits from an accessibility and convenience point of view. And I was just going to flag up one of the areas that we're looking at hard at the moment is around decarbonising electricity generation, and particularly peaking plants that is operating flexibly, switching on and off in response to the demand pattern, and also fluctuations in the supply profile from the rest of the electricity generation fleet, effectively the renewable side of things. What we're investigating at the moment is what we're calling a peaker hub model. So we would site kit next to the peaker plants, size that so that when it's switched on, it provides the amount of hydrogen that those peaker plants will need to run at that particular point. But when they don't need to run, ideally carry on producing hydrogen and then use that as a hub spot to start to kickstart other uses of hydrogen and supply it from the same hub geographic location. So that's just a few more thoughts really about how we're approaching it and what we can see our technology bringing to those particular challenges.
Thank you. Liz.
Thanks so much. That's really helpful, just understanding the detail and the nuances a bit more of what disruption can look like in the hydrogen sector. One follow-up question on this kind of before, unless there's anything else people want to add, we move on to the next question, which is currently, in your impression, would you say these disruptive models are still slightly kind of tinkering at the edge, but there's still quite a lot of your activity focused on the incumbent, more traditional business models? Or is it now at the stage where you feel like these approaches are kind of taking over and transforming the sector?
I mean, from our perspective, I'd say it's still very early days, and there is a lot of embedded inertia. I think also one of the biggest challenges we face is that because we're a new technology, people just haven't heard of it and aren't aware of the capabilities and benefits it can bring to a whole range of use cases. And what I mean by people haven't heard of it, it then means the regulatory framework tends to be written and implemented from the perspective of traditional, more familiar technologies, as far as you can have traditional technologies in the hydrogen space. But people have heard of electrolysis of water as a means of producing hydrogen. People have heard of CCUS enabled hydrogen production. They haven't heard of what we're doing, and because a lot of the regulatory legislative context was written 3-4 years ago, it's all on the assumption, stuff tends to be written on the assumption that you're either CCUS enabled or you're electrolysis of water. And therefore we spend a lot of our time saying, hang on, but what about us? Where do we fit into this framework? Where do we fit into these particular rules? We don't. We need help, therefore opening up that and making sure that there is a genuinely technology agnostic playing field.
I think maybe I just a couple of observations summarising. I thank you everyone that contributed here. Liz, I think for context, and I think this was said in one of the earlier comments quite well, is that hydrogen as a molecule in itself is not something that's new or unfamiliar within its I guess established application areas in the process and in a number of industrial applications as a process gas. I think that the challenge, I guess, of trying to look at disruption here is that we're trying to disrupt in a very dynamic situation. So it's not just one sector into which there's new incumbents that are disrupting. The sector itself is evolving from that, industrial gas setup that was there to meet the needs of a certain amount of end users, through to hydrogen playing a role in very much a transitioning energy system. And then you have incumbents coming from the industrial gas sector, from the oil and gas sector, from other engineering houses that are bringing their skills into a sector which itself is transitioning. And then you have players that have new and different ways of looking at how to make the hydrogen, how to distribute the hydrogen, and how to bring it available into these new applications at convenience and cost to the end users. So you're almost you're building disruption onto a sector that's itself evolving. So it's kind of the number of different sort of dynamic things at play, and I guess you've got a flavour of that from some of the the information that you've received so far. So I hope it's been helpful, but I imagine ourselves and many of the members can provide more information if needed to just set the tone of what I've discussed there, because it's a little bit complex, I would say, in terms of trying to navigate disruption in what is quite a nascent sector in many ways. So yeah.
Great, thank you. It's really helpful. So I think really leads us quite well onto session 2, which is like, you know, particularly for this kind of nascent transitioning sector such as hydrogen, what conditions would kind of better enable the building of disruptive business models, and what barriers are currently preventing this within the UK? So we've touched on some of that in your last comments, really, Duncan, around regulation. But yeah, if there's kind of anything else people want to kind of come in with as what you think are the main enablers and the main barriers in this space.
I'd say all of those listed are barriers.
And if you had to prioritise, are some more of a barrier than others, or are they all kind of equally interlinked and reinforcing one another?
Probably access to finance and regulations are the two that I would prioritise.
Thanks, Duncan. Hugh.
Yes, no, I'd agree to Duncan's view there. Access to finance, still in the early adoption phase of hydrogen. The costs are still quite high for hydrogen-specific equipment, and it is making that capital investment for off-takers. And the challenges potentially even with blending hydrogen into the natural gas system, which is difficult. And from a regulations and a standards perspective, you know, we're at a fairly good state now, but you know, even 3-4 years in of doing hydrogen projects, we're still discovering new things. Yep.
Always some challenges. Okay, thank you for that, Paul.
Yeah, I suppose you know, my view is there needs to be reduced planning and land use problems. I know with the production of the low carbon clusters that are currently being planned, such as HyNet in the northwest and the East Coast cluster. You know, these clusters have the potential to produce hydrogen on the gigawatt scale, which would in itself be a huge disruptor. You know, having that potential massive supply of low carbon hydrogen to a variety of different businesses in those regions. And as we've seen in the East Coast cluster, there's now significant delays due to planning disputes, you know, land disputes with other potential businesses, and that's potentially causing reduced investment and reduced confidence in hydrogen. So I know my personal view is the government needs to do more to streamline these projects to increase investment and business confidence. And then ultimately long term, the government needs to also, you know, consider doing the project union pipeline project, which could potentially connect all these low carbon clusters and hydrogen production together, which would again long term increase investment into hydrogen use and confidence in its use by businesses. And I also agree in you know, like that the regulations are currently too confusing. You know, we're still using existing gas safety regulations, flammable gas safety regulations. There's no hydrogen specific safety regulation at the moment, which again increases confusion because hydrogen does have different properties to other flammable gases, and it makes it harder for businesses to use it because of the fact that they're having to consider these differences and learn about them. And yeah, I think you know, getting the approval for sites to be to use large amounts of hydrogen is an extremely long and difficult process as well. You know, having to get that hazardous substance consent is a difficult process. So I think there's lots of things that can be done to increase the uptake and use of hydrogen in the UK.
Great, thanks. Shane, I'm going to let you step in and then we'll move back to Hugh.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Paul, just want to pick up a point there on the regulatory regime in terms of, say, new technology, new hydrogen technology, because we often think of regulation as a barrier, but also it can be a an opportunity in terms of new technologies, in particular where those regulations haven't been created yet, and how that can create more certainty, or even give the UK a lead over other countries' regulatory regimes. So I wonder if there's any opportunities there on the regulatory
Definitely.
side over and above the barriers. Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely opportunities. I mean, right now the government is consulting on hydrogen blending, which is where we could potentially mix hydrogen into the natural gas transmission network. I think there is a big opportunity now to make some core hydrogen specific safety regulations. We've got a gas act. I think we should have a hydrogen act, where it makes clear what the safety distances are, what the certain protocols are, so that therefore makes outside investors and businesses understand it more and have more confidence.
We seem to have lost Emma at a crucial moment, so hopefully she gets back online. But in the meantime, Hugh, do you want to come in?
Yes, yeah, no, I was just listening to Paul then, and it was all something very true. The other thing I've just sort of bumped into my head is, and it's not up there, is skills. Skills within hydrogen. We've talked to a lot of clients looking to modify their process from natural gas to hydrogen, but we've heard the same arguments through and through. They trust their local engineers, workmen to change a valve out on a natural gas system, but they would not be comfortable doing the same on a hydrogen system. So it would be it does require maybe not a different skill set, but a higher level of certainty, specifically when you're talking about, the fugitive emissions, ATEX areas, classification areas. It is something to consider.
Yeah, if I could just cut in there as well, I fully agree with that. My company is all about upskilling, people in industry. And when it comes to using hydrogen isn't anything new. It's been used in industry for a long time for various processes, including ammonia production and things. And it's just sort of ensuring that skill set is transferred to new industries that want to have that uptake of hydrogen use, and ensuring that they recognise the key differences in its safety.
So sorry, everyone. I don't know what happened. I've left and come back. So apologies for leaving mid. It sounds like you've been able to continue in my absence. So yeah, just to let you know I'm back.
Thank you.
Okay, Duncan.
Thank you. I was just going to pick up on again on the thinking about list there, and coming back to the access to finance one, and government support for innovation. I think generally at the R&D end, we don't do too badly in the UK. One of the co-founders at High Rock would profoundly disagree. He hates Innovate UK with a passion, because he was saying, when we were a fledgling company, they were absolutely risk averse in a way that you go, this is not helpful. But that said, I think I was just going to stress there is this sort of a first of a kind funding gap. I think it's quite well flagged now as a sort of valley of death for finance. And I was just going to point out a report that we contributed to early this year, I think it was, produced by Clean Tech for UK, that was called Unlocking Investment for First of a Kind Projects and the Clean Tech Advantage. there's definitely a gap there, helping businesses that have, you know, done the R&D, proven their technology works, proven their idea works, and getting through this valley of death to the point where they can start to scale up. And that is somewhere I would say that you need to have a good think about there, and could assist, you know, disruptive ideas in that way.
Any other thoughts, comments from the room on this question? Liz, do you feel you've gathered? Oh, here we go. Here's Stella. Let's put something in the chat. So I think you're building on the demands point here. And I think, yeah, I don't know if you want to expand on that in the call itself, Stella, but I can see that it's a key part of us. And I think Shane had put a comment there earlier around the need for demand side mechanisms and building confidence with end users. Do you want to add any more thoughts to that, Stella?
No, but I think that is key to moving this forwards. We have production in place. One of the biggest barriers for HEA projects at the moment is securing that offtake. And there's a lot of barriers. It's not just about having the hydrogen there, it's how do you get it there, ensuring that they've got that security of supply and that you're not going to leave them high and dry, ensuring that they can change their processes to allow them to use hydrogen, and that their staff are supported in being able to then continue that process, that they have access to operation and maintenance, which again, a lot of that is European based. So there's a lot of gaps for us there. And I think when we've spoke a lot about access to finance in this particular question, and one of the biggest barriers that we're finding is policy certainty. I mean, we have had the hydrogen strategy and I know it's getting refreshed, but a lot of barriers have moved, our goals have been moved and changed, and that's not given any kind of positivity to financiers on hydrogen.
Thanks, Stella. Paul?
Yeah, just on that point about you know, having a reliable off-taker for hydrogen, you know, that's why personally I think it's really important that the government you know, accepts and allows hydrogen blending to take place, you know, the mixing of a small amount of hydrogen in with the natural gas transmission network, because that will allow a reliable off-taker for large scale and potentially smaller scale hydrogen projects moving forward. You know, if for some reason they're not able to sell all of it to local industry. And it's been seen that in other countries throughout the EU that hydrogen blending is already being allowed. You know, I think Germany allows up to 10% of their natural gas to be blended with hydrogen. So, you know, currently I think the government is consulting on whether it's up to 2 or 3%, something like that. So I think, you know, hopefully if that gets allowed, it means we'll have that reliable off-taker.
Stella?
Just quickly coming in on that blending point, that also opens up opportunities for different type, well, not innovative business models, but green gas certificates, which is another business model which could drive the industry forward. And we're seeing that be really successful in Australia, where they've started blending and they're actually selling green gas certificates, which could be hydrogen, biomethane that is blended into the gas networks, and they're actually seeing industrial demand for that because that allows them to lower their Scope 1 emissions very easily without having to change anything internally in their processes or their factories.
Thank you. And there's a few other points coming in on the chat. So Shane, was there anything you wanted to say in response to what's coming in the chat, or any of the remarks?
I think I'm good, actually. Yeah, and
yeah,
I'm quite
you're
happy
good.
to do just
Yeah, that's
too.
fine.
Yeah,
Just checking you're gathering the information you need. I think a point on the consultation that's been referred to. So yeah, I think you explained the I guess the concept quite well there, Paul. But that consultation has closed, so we now await government response on that. And it's exactly as you say. I think it's all around trying to have the natural gas grid as an off-taker of last resort, which has been one of our asks, and I know other stakeholders have asked for something similar as one of the mechanisms to reduce risk in these large-scale HEA projects that have been referenced. The other thing, and I know I'm speaking to obviously the DBT colleagues here, you're probably aware that we are awaiting this updated strategy, which I know is planned for the autumn, that I think we understand may be slightly delayed. But the expectation of that is it will have more of a demand-led focus. That's I think what's being sort of muted. I think we will await with interest to see what mechanisms that actually means in terms of how that's framed in the strategy, and then what details will follow. But I think it's clear that for we can do all of the disruption along the supply chain, but ultimately we need to make sure that we have a set of customers or off-takers, or however you want to describe them, that feel that there's a policy landscape and a confidence overall in the sector that will enable them to participate as these very important sort of endpoints in terms of the end users that will benefit from the hydrogen that's being produced. So just adding that just for context. So does anyone else? I know there's a few other things in the chat, so we'll gather all of that as well. And I thank you for adding that. Does anyone else want to make any other remarks on this particular set of questions? If not, I'll hand back to Liz.
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to check Ryan and Stephen, if there's anything to add, either to reinforce others' points or to offer an alternative perspective. Be great to hear from you too.
The only thing I kind of would add is just about the regulation, about the pathways to LCHS. This is just something I'm actually just exploring now, but obviously I'm realizing there's not that many that are accepted at the moment. And part of being a disruptive technology is probably, you know, you might not be fitting into those categories in the first place. So I'm looking ahead of this now. It's something we've got a meeting actually set up with one of the policy advisors at DESNES. So I'll know more next week, but it seems that one of those things are not maybe going to be so easy to change or to add in, just due to the fact that I'm just speaking like from our what we do as part of our process. It's not something that's currently recognised, and just wondering how onerous that might be.
Yeah. So Hugh, you have some thoughts on that part?
Yeah, so it's sort of picking up on the regulation that Ryan was talking about there. So really the concern we have as a company, and it could be the fact that we're fairly conservative. We have a degree of hydrogen safety or process safety experts, which is really their job. But with the lack of clear regulation or guidelines as to which specific standards are, I think we always will err on the side of caution, which means that we'll end up with highly conservative designs, which will obviously cost our clients more. So yeah, you know, the main regulation that this all comes back to is the Health and Safety at Work Act. And that just says you need a specific risk assessment for the operation, and a lot of the time that yeah does lead you down to particularly stringent demands about a more specific regulation to refer to.
Thank you. Duncan.
Just a quick comment on the LCHS. Version 1 came out and I think it was 25 pages long. We're waiting version 4. Version 3 is up to about 100 pages plus an annex that's another 50 pages long. And it's getting to the point where it's very, very hard to see the wood for the trees.
Some simplicity, maybe, I guess, is perhaps you're asking, Duncan, is it?
I think I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
After being on the end of a HAR1 project, it's becoming quite onerous, which obviously again stifles innovation, and that's not what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, 100%. You know, it's it feels like government's trying to cover off every possible eventuality within the set of rules within the LCHS, and it's getting more and more and more detailed, therefore, and that is slowing everything down, because you spend half the time trying to work out, right, what are we supposed to do there? How do we do it? How do we get to where we're trying to? So trying to make that approach more agile would be a step forwards again, I think.
Yeah, I think agile feels like a good word, and I think there's two prongs to that. So Liz and team, just building upon both those points. There's the whole process of going through the HAR project sort of submission and moving that forward, as Stella's indicated. There's also the low carbon hydrogen standard, which I think is it sounds like I hadn't read the 150 pages, Duncan, I'd marry for ploughing through that. But I know there's two aspects to it. One is that it's driven by, in principle, a level of associated emissions, but there are explicit pathways referenced, as I understand it, which can make it problematic if you're not sort of referenced explicitly. But then the other part feels like that, yeah, there's quite a lot of paperwork to plough through. So I guess there's a few aspects there that could be stifling innovation, while I guess we understand that government departments need to do things in the correct way to work within the framework of what they need to do, but it's trying to find that balance. I know some of the feedback on the HAR projects, I think, will be acknowledged for some of the future HAR rounds, but again, we await to see what that looks like. But enabling businesses to move, as was said here, with more agility and a slightly faster pace, because the longer they wait